Hey guys, tonight we slip quietly into a world where the air feels just a little too cold and the sun seems just a little too dim, and you, yes, you, are about to survive something historians like to call the year without summer. You probably won't survive this. I mean, emotionally, because who expects June to feel like late October? But don't worry, we're just imagining it. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're settling in, drop your location and the local time in the comments. I always love seeing where you all are tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The cold begins subtly, almost politely, as if nature clears its throat before doing something dramatic. You step outside one early morning in 1816, expecting the usual mild warmth of late spring. Instead, a crisp bite sinks into your cheeks, sharper than it should be. Your breath hangs in the air like you're in January, not May. You tug your jacket a little closer, puzzled, thinking maybe you've just grown soft over the winter. But no, this cold has a kind of determination to it, a clinginess, like that one friend who always insists the AC should be set to Arctic tundra. And unlike that friend, you can't just ask it to stop. At first, you shrug it off. Weather is weird sometimes. Historians still argue whether people of the early 19th century simply accepted bizarre temperature swings more casually than we do. After all, you didn't have weather apps pushing extreme cold warnings to your phone, mostly because your phone doesn't exist. You have the sky, the air, the colour of the morning frost. You notice the fields have a glitter to them when they shouldn't. The earth feels stiff under your boots, like it forgot to thaw properly. There's a strange tension in the village. People make excuses. Cold spring, strange wind patterns, maybe a late-season snowstorm in the mountains messing things up. No one wants to admit that something bigger might be happening. You overhear the blacksmith mutter that this reminds him of the hard winter 5 years earlier, but even he sounds unsure. And when the most stubborn guy in town sounds unsure, you know you're in trouble. One morning, the sun rises with a murky, washed-out look, as if it stayed up all night partying and now regrets everything. A faint haze lingers across the sky. You narrow your eyes, wondering if smoke from a distant fire drifted in, but the air smells clean, too clean. A local quirk of the time, some people believed strange skies meant comets or celestial omens. You laugh it off, though quietly, because you don't want to be the one everyone calls superstitious. Still, the sky has that unsettling something's up vibe, like when the room goes quiet just before someone drops bad news. The cold sinks, deeper with each passing day. Your morning routine changes as you adapt. Instead of stepping outside freely, you pause at the doorway and brace yourself, like you're preparing to jump into icy water. The wind whistles across the hills with that spooky, lonely sound wind only makes when it's colder than you're mentally prepared for. You wrap your scarf tight, feeling like a burrito of mild denial. A known historical fact trickles through local gossip. Birds returning from migration are late or fewer, as if they took one look at the temperatures and said, nope. Some farmers in nearby villages mention that their spring buds froze right off the branches. You hear about sheep miscarrying, which sends a ripple of quiet fear across town because livestock is life. People start whispering, asking whether they're cursed, whether this is a punishment, or whether this is just weather being rude. By early June, everyone knows something is wrong. The cold is not easing. You feel it in your bones in a way you can't ignore anymore. Even the elders, who always insist the weather was harsher back in their day, start shaking their heads in disbelief. When those folks admit something is off, it's basically nature's version of being handed an eviction notice. One fringe tidbit you overhear from a traveller is that the sky looks different because of some giant mountain exploding half the world away. He doesn't know the name, Tambora, but he swears sailors talked about an eruption so big it turned the sky dark for days. You're not sure whether to believe him or chalk it up to travelling lie syndrome. Historians still argue whether news of the eruption travelled fast enough to matter, but you tuck the idea in your mind like a weird puzzle piece that may or may not fit later. The cold begins affecting your daily routine in small but noticeable ways. Your fingers numb faster when you fetch water. The chickens grumble more loudly than usual. Well, as much as chickens can grumble. Even your cat starts sleeping under your blanket, which you're secretly grateful for because warmth is warmth. Modern joke moment. If you had a thermostat back then, you'd be staring at it like, I know I didn't set you to 40 degrees. The village meets to discuss the strange weather. Everyone gathers in the church hall, bundled in coats and scarves like it's a winter holiday. The talk is tense. People look at one another with that "should we panic yet" expression. Some insist it'll pass, others fear the harvest will fail. You sit quietly, listening, feeling as if the walls themselves are holding their breath. When you walk home after the meeting, the cold hits you harder than ever. The wind howls through the bare branches, and you feel a creeping suspicion that you're witnessing the very first signals of something much larger, something global, something none of you have the vocabulary for yet. And as you step inside, shut the door, and press your palm against the wood, you can't shake the thought that this cold isn't leaving anytime soon. You wake the next morning thinking maybe, the world has regained its sanity overnight. Maybe the cold has finally loosened its grip. Maybe yesterday was just a weird atmospheric hiccup. You open the door with that cautious optimism of someone hoping reality has reset itself, and then you stop dead in your tracks. Snow. In June. Not a dusting, not a cute little sprinkle, not the kind of frost that plays dress-up pretending to be snow. No, actual, honest snowflakes drifting lazily from a sky that has absolutely no business producing them this time of year. You stare upward, blinking as if the clouds might apologize for this obvious mistake. The flakes land on your eyelashes cold and soft and melt instantly on your warm skin. You can feel them, those tiny ice crystals brushing your cheeks, and your brain does that thing where it tries to reboot, like it's stuck on a loading screen. For a moment, you're pretty sure the universe is trolling you specifically. Around you, the village is equally stunned. People step out of their homes wrapped in mismatched layers, mouths open, hands outstretched. A few kids laugh and try to make the world's sorriest snowballs, because in their minds, snow, fun, even if the calendar is screaming in confusion. Adults, meanwhile, trade glances that say, okay, this is officially not normal. Mainstream historical fact quietly settles into your thoughts. In June 1816, snow genuinely fell across parts of New England and Europe. Red and brown snow even, because volcanic ash mixed with it high in the atmosphere. That part you keep to yourself for now. No need to make anything more unsettling than it already is. You take a few steps into the yard, boots crunching in frozen grass, and your breath makes long white ribbons in the air. Birds stay silent in the trees. The world has this eerie hush to it, like everyone is collectively waiting for something to happen. Even the cows seem offended, stamping their hooves as if the sky has personally insulted them. Your neighbour, Thomas, trudges over, brushing snow off his shoulders. This is backwards, he mutters. Plain backwards. His beard is already collecting frost, which would be funny if the situation weren't so surreal. He looks at you with raised eyebrows. You ever seen anything like this? You shake your head. Even the elders haven't seen this. You remember overhearing one of them saying earlier that this kind of thing hasn't happened since the Dark Ages, though historians still argue whether that was an exaggeration or an actual reference to some earlier climate anomaly. Either way, it's not comforting. The flakes fall heavier as the morning stretches on. Gardens disappear beneath thin white blankets that shouldn't exist. Tender shoots, carefully planted just weeks earlier, bow under the weight. You crouch beside one of your own rows, brushing snow away to check the soil. It's hard as stone, frozen solid, in June. Your stomach sinks. A strange reddish tint hangs in the sky, making the snowy landscape look even more otherworldly. It's that same murky colour you noticed earlier in spring, the same hazy glow that made sunsets look like something out of apocalyptic fan art. You don't know it yet, but microscopic volcanic particles, flung into the stratosphere by Mount Tambora's massive eruption, are bending and scattering the light. A quirky historical tidbit. Some people in 1816 blamed these strange skies on burning fog, a mysterious phenomenon they believed came from decaying vegetation. You try not to think too hard about that one. The day gets colder as the sun climbs, a complete betrayal of everything you thought you knew about how daylight works. You rub your hands together for warmth and joke weakly to yourself that maybe you should write a stern letter to the weather department. Except, not invented yet. Your only option is to keep layering clothing until you resemble a walking quilt. By midday, You can see the full impact of the sudden freeze. Puddles have iced over, icicles drip from the roofs of houses. A group of villagers gathers to measure the snowfall because humans, across all centuries, are incapable of resisting the urge to quantify weirdness. Someone announces it's more than an inch. Another claims it's 2. A third argues the ruler is crooked. The debate gets so heated it's briefly the warmest thing happening outdoors. You feel an odd mix of fear and fascination. Fear, because snow in June means trouble. Fascination, because you're witnessing something historical, though you would much rather witness something like the invention of chocolate cake than climate catastrophe. But here you are, standing in a winter that shouldn't exist. What unsettles you most isn't the snow itself, but the silence that follows. No birdsong, no buzzing insects, no gentle hum of summer life. Just the soft hiss of falling flakes and the occasional distant creak of a frozen tree branch bowing under unexpected weight. The world feels paused. You spot the baker struggling to shovel his walkway, muttering under his breath. He glances at you and calls out, "Think it'll pass by tomorrow?" You want to say yes, you really do, but the truth hangs cold in your chest. You shrug helplessly. Another joke bubbles up quietly. "Maybe July will behave," he snorts. A small moment of levity in a morning that desperately needs it. As afternoon approaches, the snow stops as abruptly as it began. But the damage is done. You return to your fields to inspect the crops again. Many shoots have turned black, frozen to death. Others sag like they're already tired of this nonsense. Your hands tighten around the wilted stems. Each plant represents food, survival, stability. And now you're not sure how any of that will look 3 months from now. People begin sweeping snow off their roofs and porches, but it feels futile, like trying to tidy up while the world rearranges itself. You can sense an unspoken question hanging over everyone. If this is June, what will the rest of the year bring? As evening falls, the cold settles in even deeper, as if the day's freak weather has encouraged it. You wrap yourself in blankets, sit by the fire, and listen to the wind rattling the shutters. A single, stubborn thought keeps repeating itself. Summer has vanished, evaporated, stolen, and tomorrow will prove that this was only the beginning. You wake the next morning hoping, foolishly, that the snow was just a one-day prank by the atmosphere, a bizarre but temporary glitch. You step outside and breathe in deeply, trying to convince yourself that today will feel normal. But the moment your boots hit the ground, you feel it. The soil is still frozen. The tips of your seedlings, those tiny green promises of summer, are drooping, darkened, or simply gone. And you know instantly that something far more troubling is happening. You walk through your small plot of land, brushing your fingers over leaves that should be vibrant but instead feel limp and brittle, like paper left too close to a fire, except in this case, too close to the cold. The plants that survived last night's freeze look stunned, as though nature delivered a slap they're still trying to process. You kneel to examine a row of beans, and when you touch a stem, it snaps clean off in your hand. You stare at the broken piece for a moment, as if it might magically reattach itself if you look concerned enough. Around the village, others are having the same morning you are. You hear the distant shouts of neighbours calling out in disbelief, frustration, or just raw confusion. A few curses float through the air, though muffled by thick scarves and thicker shock. Someone slams a door. Another person drops to their knees in the field and just stares at the destruction. You get it. Farming is already a gamble in a normal year. In a year like this, it feels like the universe is stacking the deck against you. A historical fact you recall hits you like a second cold wind. In 1816, repeated frost throughout June wiped out crops again and again, forcing people to replant multiple times, often only for the new seedlings to die the same night. You're living that cycle now, right from the start. Plant, hope, freeze, repeat. You take a step back and look at your field as a whole. It doesn't look like early summer. It looks like late autumn after an early frost, except this time everything is wrong. The colours are muted. Greens have turned a sickly yellow or deep black. The soil is hard and unforgiving. You press your heel into it and feel how resistant it is, like the earth is holding its breath. A fringe tidbit you overheard from an elderly neighbour flits through your mind. She said that back when she was young, the spirits of frost would sometimes sneak into the fields out of season if the land had been disrespected. You don't believe in frost spirits. Well, maybe 1% of you wonders. but mostly you file it under quirky local folklore. Still, if frost spirits were real, you're pretty sure they're parting right now. You continue assessing the damage. Potatoes, half dead. Corn, barely sprouted, now shriveled. Wheat, patchy and fragile. Even the hardy crops, the ones that should withstand most surprises, look like they've been through an unpleasant time. You run a hand through your hair, muttering to yourself, "This can't be happening," but it is. Around mid-morning, the villagers gather again to compare notes. Everyone is bundled up like it's December. A few people bring ruined plants as evidence, holding them up dramatically, as if staging a courtroom trial against the weather. One man lays out 4 different seedlings, each from a different replanting attempt. None survived last night. "I can't keep doing this," he says, shaking his head. "I've never seen crops die this fast." Someone else adds, "Historians still argue whether these cold spells come from a natural cycle or divine punishment." You raise an eyebrow, because historians, of which your village currently has exactly 0, aren't here to argue anything, but you appreciate the attempt at intellectual commentary. The town's elder suggests replanting again, but the idea lands with a collective groan. Seeds aren't infinite. Every replanting attempt drains what little supply everyone has. And even if you plant today, who's to say another frost isn't lurking around the corner like a villain waiting for its dramatic entrance? You walk home with heavy steps, feeling the weight of the season pressing down on your shoulders. You sit at your table, staring at your small pouch of remaining seeds. Each handful feels like a gamble now. You imagine the soil laughing at you. Okay, maybe you're being dramatic, but when nature is this unpredictable, it's easy to take it personally. After lunch, you try replanting anyway. What else can you do? You dig carefully, pressing new seeds into the ground, whispering a tiny prayer even if you're not the praying type. You gently water the rows, though the water feels colder than it should. You cover some areas with straw in hopes of adding a thin shield against the next cold snap. Every small action feels like a last-ditch effort to outsmart a force much bigger than you. Later in the afternoon, clouds gather again. Not snow clouds this time, but a thick, hazy layer that dims the sunlight. You stand in your yard watching the sky shift into shades of orange and brown. It's the same eerie colour you've seen for days, and while you don't know the science behind it, you feel uneasy. A traveller passing through mutters something about ash in the air, but he can't explain further. He shrugs and keeps walking, leaving you, with more questions than answers. You sigh and rub your temples, joking to yourself that if the weather keeps this up, you might start charging rent for the frost, since it seems determined to live in your fields. The humour helps, just a little. As evening settles in, the temperature drops again. You stand at the door feeling that sharp coldness creep in, and your stomach knots. You know that if tonight brings another freeze, your freshly planted seeds are done for. You gently close the door, trying not to let your growing anxiety show. You sit by the fireplace, warming your hands, listening to the wind outside. The fire crackles softly, a comforting reminder that warmth still exists somewhere in the world. But the worry lingers in your mind like a shadow. Tomorrow may bring frost again, or snow, or something even stranger. And every day this continues, your chances of a harvest shrink just a little more. The next morning begins not with birdsong or sunlight slipping through the window, but with the low, unhappy groaning of your livestock. You hear it before you even open your eyes, a kind of anxious chorus drifting in from the barnyard. You lie there for a moment, staring at the ceiling, knowing that sound means one thing. The animals are feeling the cold just as painfully as you are. You pull on your jacket, which is becoming a permanent part of your wardrobe these days, and step outside. The air bites your face instantly. Your breath fogs in front of you in thick clouds. It shouldn't be this cold. Not now, not in early summer, but here it is again, settling in like an uninvited houseguest who has decided to extend their stay indefinitely. You head toward the barn. Your boots crunch on the frost, a sound you're slowly learning to dread. When you push open the barn door, the animals turn toward you with a mixture of hope and accusation. They want warmth, they want pasture, they want, well, summer, and you can't give them any of that. Your cows, normally calm and predictable creatures, are restless. They stomp their hooves in frustration, their breath steaming in thick plumes. Their water trough, again, is frozen. You mutter something sarcastic under your breath about how, of course, the trough froze in June because apparently the laws of nature took a vacation. You spend several minutes breaking the ice with a hammer, and even though it's getting routine, you still shake your head the entire time. A mainstream historical fact flashes through your mind. During the year without summer, farmers across Europe and North America struggled to keep livestock alive because there simply wasn't enough feed. Pastures didn't grow, hay supplies ran out, animals starved, wandered, or were sold for a fraction of their usual value. You're living smack in the middle of that problem now. You walk the pasture fence line, surveying what used to be your animal's food source. The grass is short, patchy, stiff with frost. It crunches under your fingers when you touch it. Even the weeds look stunned. In normal years, you'd let the cows graze freely by now, but there's nothing for them to eat, and you can't keep feeding them winter stores forever. Winter stores are finite, and winter is, well, apparently happening again. You check on the chickens next. They're huddled together in a pathetic little pile of feathers and indignation. When you open the coop, they cluck at you loudly, as if demanding an explanation. You apologize. Yes, you absolutely apologize to chickens, and scatter what little feed you can spare. One bold hen pecks your boot in protest. You can't blame her. If your meals were suddenly rationed, you'd be annoyed too. A quirky tidbit you recall crosses your mind. In 1816, some desperate farmers reportedly tried feeding their livestock strange substitutes, like boiled nettles, moss, or even ground-up leather scraps. You shudder at the thought, hoping it doesn't come to that. You've got enough chaos without introducing cow leather stew into your life. By midday, you're working out creative ways to stretch your remaining fodder. You tie bundles of twigs together, trying to imitate brush feed. You gather whatever scraps the early summer thaw produced before the cold returned. You even eye the dried leaves stored in a corner of the barn, the ones you saved by accident last fall, and wonder if animals can eat them safely. You try to remember if you read something about goats eating anything. Do cows count? Historians still argue whether livestock could adapt to emergency diets, or whether most of them simply grew weaker by the week. Throughout the day, you notice more small signs of trouble. Your horse paws at the ground, searching desperately for something to nibble. Your sheep bleat loudly whenever they see you, as if you're holding out on them. Your pig, usually enthusiastic about anything edible, sniffs the frozen mud and snorts in disgust. You run back and forth between the barn and the house, improvising, adjusting, rationing. By late afternoon, you're exhausted. You sit on a wooden stool in the barn, listening to the rhythmic breathing of your animals. They're alive, for now. But they're hungry and confused, and you can't shake the sinking feeling that their survival will depend on decisions you'll have to make far sooner than you want. You stroke the side of one of your cows, feeling her ribs more clearly than you should. You whisper something reassuring, soft, almost instinctive. You don't want her to sense your worry, even though animals always do. Outside, the sky once again turns that strange volcanic shade, orangey red at the horizon, fading into a cold grey higher up. It's beautiful in a haunting way, but also unsettling. You've learned by now that a pretty sky is not a good sign. It means the air is full of volcanic particles. Light bends, colours distort, and temperatures plummet. You stare at it with a mix of awe and annoyance, joking quietly to yourself that this might be the world's first ever Instagram filter, except it's one nobody wanted. When evening comes, you make one more check on the animals before heading inside. The cows huddle together for warmth. The chickens puff up their feathers, looking twice their size. The horse lowers its head and lets out a sigh that sounds almost human. You close the barn doors tightly and latch them, as if sealing the cold out will make any difference. Inside, you collapse into your chair, rubbing your temples. You're tired, not just from work, but from worry, the deep, persistent kind that settles in your bones, the kind that whispers questions at you when you're trying to sleep. How long will this last? How much food do you have left? How do you keep the animals alive if the world refuses to warm up? You take a slow breath and lean back, listening to the faint evening wind outside. You remind yourself that people have survived hard years before. They've adapted, improvised, endured. But even as you try to reassure yourself, one harsh truth lingers. If the crops fail and the livestock fail, what happens to you? You head into town the next morning carrying a small bag of goods you hope might still be worth something. Some candles, a few wooden spoons you carved last winter, and a pair of wool socks you knitted during a particularly boring snowstorm. Normally, even a handful of simple items would get you a decent trade at the market. But as you approach the square, you feel a twist in your stomach. Something is different. Something is off. The market looks thinner than usual. Not physically thinner, you're not thankfully hallucinating skinny buildings, but quieter, emptier. Stalls that should be overflowing with early produce, lettuce, radishes, spring greens, stand bare. A few vendors have their carts pulled halfway shut, as if embarrassed to show how little they have left. The whole place feels like someone turned the saturation down on the world. You step forward carefully, scanning for familiar faces. You spot Mrs. Alden, who sells eggs and butter, but her stall is nearly empty. Just 3 eggs sit in a small basket, and one of them is cracked. She looks up as you approach, her face tight with worry. "Morning," she says, and her voice sounds thin. You ask her how things are going, and she gestures helplessly at the basket. "The hens aren't laying right," she mutters. "Too cold. They need warmth, sunlight. They're confused. You buy 1 egg out of sympathy, not because you need it, but because she needs the coin more than you need omelettes." She gives you a grateful half smile, and you tuck the egg carefully into your bag. You keep walking. The butcher's stall? Empty. The baker's table? Only 2 loaves, both priced higher than last month by a ridiculous margin. You joke silently to yourself that the bread must now come with a free luxury carriage ride or something. But no, this is inflation born from desperation. A mainstream historical fact echoes in your mind. Food prices during the year. Without summer skyrocketed in many regions, with oats costing nearly 8 times their normal price in some parts of Europe. Even horses were starving, and horses are basically the VIP customers of oats. If the horses are in trouble, the humans are definitely in trouble. You stop at a stall selling root vegetables and greet the farmer, Mr. Hill, whom you've known for years. He scratches his beard and shakes his head before you even ask. "Lost my whole second planting," he says grimly. "Went out at dawn yesterday, frost everywhere, everything blackened. I don't know what I'll do if this keeps up." He gestures at the small pile of wrinkled parsnips on his table. They look exhausted. Honestly, you feel a little exhausted on their behalf. You pick one up, examine it, and put it back, trying not to offend the parsnip's fragile self-esteem. You ask whether he has anything else. He grimaces. "Nothing. People have been offering shirts, boots, anything for a handful of grain, but I've barely got grain for myself." A quirky tidbit you overheard a few days ago bubbles up in your thoughts. Someone claimed a town 2 valleys over resorted to making bread from ground-up tree bark mixed with flour. Bark, bread. You can't decide whether that's horrifying or innovative. Maybe both. You hope it doesn't come to that here, though you're starting to mentally rank nearby trees by chewability, just in case. You wander to the centre of the square, where a large wooden board holds the latest notices. The parchment sheets pinned there flap weakly in the wind. Usually the board lists things like "lost cow," "reward offered," or "town meeting Tuesday," or "available second-hand plough in decent condition." But today the board feels more like a bleak information hub for escalating disaster. One notice mentions a local family planning to move west in search of better weather. Another warns that due to poor harvest predictions, the town may need to ration grain later in the summer. A third is from the miller, who writes that production will be reduced due to low wheat availability. These little announcements stack up in your mind like bad news dominoes. A small crowd gathers near the baker's stall as someone shouts about rising prices. Here we go. The tension that's been simmering for days finally starts to bubble. A man demands to know why bread costs so much. The baker, sweaty, red-faced and holding a half-empty basket, tries to explain that flour is scarce, and if he sells bread cheaply, he won't survive the month. Someone else insists he's price gouging. Someone else tells them both to calm down. Someone else mutters that the end of days is near. Historians still argue whether people in 1816 genuinely believed the apocalypse was coming, but in moments like this, you wouldn't blame them. You step back, not wanting to get pulled into the fray. The market feels less like a place of trade now and more like a pressure cooker. Everyone is stressed. Everyone is hungry. Everyone is scared. They hide it well for the most part, but it leaks out in sharp words, clenched fists and darting eyes. Eventually you find a small stall selling dried beans. The vendor, an old man with a face like worn leather, watches you approach. "Only a handful left," he says. "Price doubled since last week." You sigh. He sighs. For a brief moment, you both share a quiet moment of mutual exhaustion. You buy a small portion anyway, because who knows when you'll find beans again. As you prepare to head home, you look around one last time. The market you've known your whole life has changed. It feels brittle, like a fabric stretched too thin. One snap, one more cold night, one more ruined crop, and the whole thing might fall apart. You shoulder your bag, feeling its disappointing lightness, and walk away. The wind cuts across the square, carrying faint snippets of conversation, fear, speculation, prayers, and frustration all blending together into a single anxious hum. And as you leave the market behind, you can't help thinking the same heavy thought over and over: if the crops are failing, if the livestock are struggling, and if even the market is running dry. Then the real famine hasn't started yet, but it's coming. You start noticing it before you even realize what you're looking at. The evenings are brighter, stranger, in a way you can't explain at first. The light stretches long past when it should, but not with the warm golden glow you expect in summer. Instead, the sky shifts into colours you've never seen outside of dreams or overly enthusiastic watercolour paintings. You step outside one late evening after tending the fire, rubbing your hands together for warmth. As the cool air brushes your cheeks, you look up, and there it is again, that impossible sky. Streaks of deep red, burnt orange, smoky purple. The sun hangs low on the horizon, a dim reddish orb like it's wearing a veil made of fine dust. You stand still for a long moment, watching it, feeling a strange mix of awe and unease. It's beautiful in the way dangerous things often are. The sky looks like it's blushing for reasons it refuses to explain. A mainstream historical fact floats through your mind. In 1816, the atmosphere was filled with volcanic aerosols from the massive eruption of Mount Tambora in Indonesia. Those tiny particles scattered sunlight in bizarre ways, making sunsets across the world glow unnaturally red for months. Artists painted them, poets wrote about them, and here you are, staring at the same eerie spectacle, feeling both lucky and mildly terrified. Nearby, the neighbour's dog whines softly at the sky, ears pinned back. Animals sense things long before humans do, and right now even the dog looks like it wants to file an official complaint. You walk to the edge of your property, crunching over frost-hardened soil, as if the earth needs to remind you, again, that summer has taken an extended leave of absence. The colours above you pulse gently as the sun dips lower. You breathe out slowly. The air tastes metallic. Or maybe that's your imagination. Honestly, with everything going on, your imagination is working overtime. The reddened sky makes you think of stories you heard as a child. Warnings about omens, prophecies, burning heavens. You're not usually one to indulge in superstition, but the world is behaving so strangely lately that even you start wondering if you missed a memo from the universe. A quirky tidbit you recall: some communities in 1816 believed these red skies meant the sky itself was on fire, or that distant nations were burning. Others thought it was a sign of divine anger. You're not ready to. Vote on which explanation is less unsettling. As twilight deepens, more villagers begin stepping outside. You hear murmured conversations drifting through the crisp air. "Never seen anything like it," one man says. "Looks like the end of days," someone else mutters. Another villager adds, "Historians still argue whether these colours are natural or spiritual." You raise an eyebrow at that one. You're pretty sure historians aren't arguing anything yet, seeing as most of them haven't even been born. You wander toward the town commons where a small group has gathered, all staring upward. Children point excitedly, tugging at their parents' sleeves. Adults stand quieter, shoulders tense, eyes narrowed. The colours reflect off their faces, casting warm tones that don't match the cold creeping into their bones. You spot Thomas, your neighbour, leaning on the fence. "You ever imagine the sky would look like this?" he asks, voice low. "Nope," you reply. "If the sky wants to try a new colour palette, it could at least warm up the temperature while it's at it." He laughs a little, one of those exhausted laughs where you're not sure if it's humour or despair, but it feels good to hear someone else find a joke in the madness. The sun finally slips below the horizon, leaving behind streaks of red like smouldering embers. Even after the light fades, the sky hangs onto the colour longer than it should. You stand there, arms wrapped around yourself, watching it slowly disappear. As night takes over, the strange beauty gives way to darkness. And with darkness comes cold. You shiver and start making your way home. Halfway there, you see something unusual, a faint glow in the distance. Not fire, not moonlight. It's an afterglow, like the sky refusing to fully dim. You've heard passing travellers mention this phenomenon, calling it dry fog or global haze. One even claimed the moon looked blue in some regions. You don't know if he was telling the truth or if he'd simply spent too much time drinking in dimly lit taverns, but tonight you can believe anything. Back inside, you sit near the window and watch the last traces of red fade away. Your room feels colder than it should for this time of year, and the fire struggles to keep up. You wrap yourself in a thick blanket and listen to the world outside. The wind is gentle tonight, but its chill is sharp enough to feel like a warning. You can't help thinking about how much these skies have changed the mood of the village. Ordinary sunsets used to be moments of calm, something predictable, something grounding. Now they feel like messages from a sky that's gone strange. Everyone tries to act normal, but you see the worry in their faces. The market is shrinking. The crops are failing. The livestock are weakening. And now even the skies look like they're bleeding. The thought sits heavy in your mind. If the sky looks like this now, what will it look like in winter? You pull the blanket tighter around your shoulders. The fire pops softly, sending tiny sparks floating upward. Your eyelids grow heavy, but your thoughts refuse to settle. Tonight's red sunset was beautiful. But beautiful things can be ominous too, and deep down you know the worst of the year is still ahead. You feel it long before you hear the first wagon creaking down the road. There's a heaviness in the air, not the weather this time, though that's still uncooperative, but a shifting mood in the village, a restlessness. People who once spoke confidently about waiting out the cold now whisper about other places, warmer places, places where crops might still grow, places where survival might not feel like a daily gamble. And then you see them, your neighbours, Thomas and his family, loading their belongings into a wagon hitched to a pair of tired-looking horses. You stop in your tracks for a moment, surprised, even though you probably shouldn't be. You walk up slowly, feeling awkward, like you're intruding on something private. Thomas gives you a weary smile. His wife ties a bundle of blankets onto the cart, her hands moving mechanically, as if she's done this too many times already. Their eldest daughter carries a small basket. Inside you see a few dried herbs, a loaf of hard bread, and what looks like a small wooden toy, the essentials, and one comfort. "You're leaving," you say quietly. It's not really a question, not anymore. He nods, exhaling heavily. "We have to try," he replies. "There's talk of better conditions farther south. Maybe they're just rumours, but staying here, staying feels like slow death." His voice cracks a little on the last word. You look around and notice other signs you somehow missed until now. Smoke from chimneys is thinner. Curtains are pulled shut in houses that used to leave doors wide open. Piles of belongings sit on porches, waiting to be sorted, some to pack, some to barter, some to abandon. Suddenly the village feels less like a community and more like a place people are preparing to walk away from. A mainstream historical fact echoes in your thoughts. In 1816, thousands of families across Europe and North America migrated in search of better climates. Entire communities uprooted themselves, convinced salvation lay beyond the next mountain or valley. Some made it, many did not. You glance at Thomas's horses. They're shivering, skinny, and about as ready for a long journey as you are ready to juggle flaming pitchforks, which is to say, not at all. "You sure you want to try this now?" you ask gently. "With the roads in this condition," his wife answers instead, "if we wait any longer, we'll have nothing left to travel with." She gestures vaguely toward the fields. No feed for the animals, no crops for the winter, no trade, no future here. There's a practicality in her tone, but behind it you hear fear and exhaustion. Children run by, two boys dragging a small wooden cart pretending they're leading a great migration. You offer a faint smile at the sight, because kids somehow manage to make even the apocalypse look like a game. But it's a brief moment of levity, swallowed quickly by the reality around you. You hear a voice behind you. "We're thinking of going too." It's Mrs. Alden, the egg seller. She looks smaller than you remember, shrunken by worry. "My hens aren't producing. My husband's been sick. We can't survive a failed harvest." She trails off, hugging her arms to her chest. A quirky tidbit comes to mind. Some families in 1816 tried moving only a few miles, just enough to reach a microclimate slightly less brutal. They'd camp near forests, hill shadows, or south-facing slopes, believing warmth hid in small pockets if only you could find them. Historians still argue whether those desperate strategies actually worked, or whether people were simply clinging to hope in geographic form. You stand there for a while, surrounded by people dismantling their entire lives piece by piece. A woman struggles to lift a chest onto her wagon. You help her without thinking. A young man debates loudly with his father about the risks of leaving versus staying. A grandmother sits quietly on her porch, holding a quilt on her lap, staring into the distance with the stillness of someone who has seen more hardship than most. "What about you?" Thomas finally asks. His voice is gentle, but the question feels heavy. "Are you thinking of leaving?" You hesitate. The truth is, you don't know. Leaving means hope, maybe, but also danger, uncertainty, hunger on the road, illness, strangers, storms, wolves, any number of things that could end you before you ever reach a better place. Staying means familiarity, but also watching your food stores shrink, your animals weaken, your fields freeze night after night. You swallow hard. "I haven't decided," you admit. "Not yet." He nods. "Don't wait too long. The farther we get into this, the harder it'll be." He climbs onto the wagon seat, reins in hand. His wife gathers the children. The horses shift their weight, snorting small clouds into the cold air. You sense the moment happening, the leaving, the break, the change you can't undo. You place a hand on the edge of their wagon and say, "Be careful, please." Thomas gives you that same weary smile. "We'll try," he says. "We'll send word if we find anything good." You know he might not be able to. Roads are unpredictable, communication unreliable, survival. Well, survival is an achievement these days. The wagon creaks as it starts moving. Wheels crunch over frost and gravel. The children wave, you wave back. And as the family disappears down the road, a strange quiet settles over you. You look around at the village, at the thinning market, the empty fields, the restless animals, the shuttered homes, and realize something you hadn't fully acknowledged until now. This place is unraveling, piece by piece, family by family, wagon by wagon, and you're going to have to decide sooner than you want whether you stay or follow the road like so many others. The morning after Thomas's family leaves, the village feels emptier, not just physically, but in its energy. It's quieter in a way you don't like, the kind of quiet that makes you glance over your shoulder even when nothing's there. You stand in your yard, hands shoved into your pockets, staring at the road they travelled. A thin trail of wheel marks still cuts through the frost, a reminder that leaving isn't just talk anymore, it's something real people are doing. You linger there longer than you intend, wondering if you should have gone with them. But then you think about your animals, your house, your remaining supplies, and the fact that you barely know what lies beyond the next ridge. The decision feels too big, too heavy, too soon. So you turn away and head toward the village centre, where another kind of survival challenge awaits. Trying to find work in a place where work is becoming as scarce as warm days. You didn't plan to look for labour outside your own land, but the fields aren't producing, and your pantry isn't exactly bursting with abundance these days. If you want to keep eating, you need to earn something. Food, coin, favours, anything. And you're not alone. As you approach town, you see others with the same idea drifting toward the square with hopeful expressions that don't quite reach their eyes. The blacksmith's forge is the loudest place in the whole village, so you start there. You step inside, and the warm blast of heat hits you like a hug from the universe. One of those rare, pleasant surprises these days. The blacksmith, arms thick as logs and face smeared with soot, pauses mid-hammer. "Looking for work?" he asks before you even speak. You nod. He sighs. "Everyone is. I've got maybe 2 days' worth of tasks. Might stretch it to 3 if you don't mind hauling scrap metal and sorting horseshoes." He scratches his beard. "But I can't pay coin. Only food. And not much of that." You consider it. Food is food. But you also know heavy labour means you'll eat more, and what he can spare won't replace the energy you'd burn. "Let me think about it," you say, stepping back. He nods, clearly used to people hesitating these days. Nearby, the carpenter sets up his tools, adjusting his apron with slow movements. You approach him next. He offers a sympathetic smile. "I'd take you on," he says. But nobody's ordering furniture. Folks are trying to sell what they already own to buy grain. I've got nothing to build. So that's 2 no's in a row, though, said politely enough. You head toward the mill. You don't expect much, and unfortunately the miller doesn't surprise you. The wheel's barely turning, he says, pointing at the sluggish water flow. The streams froze last week. My grindstones are useless unless someone brings grain, and nobody has any. He shrugs apologetically. Strike 3. You wander the streets, listening to snippets of conversations. Everyone is searching for work, trading what little they have, bartering. Skills for scraps. A group of older women are knitting mittens they hope to trade. A teenage boy offers to chop firewood in exchange for a loaf of bread. A travelling labourer brags, probably exaggerates, that he found temporary work in a town 2 days south, repairing storm-damaged roofs. His words stick in your mind. Roof repair, storm damage, other towns, possibilities. A mainstream historical fact comes to mind. During the year without summer, thousands of people wandered from village to village looking for day labour. They offered everything from weaving to carpentry to basic farmhand skills, hoping someone, anyone, had food to spare. You decide to push your luck a little farther. You walk toward the church where a small crowd has formed. People whisper about a man named Harlan who supposedly needs help reinforcing his barn before the next cold snap hits. You follow the group until you see him. Tall, broad-shouldered, leaning on a fence with a thoughtful expression. Help with the barn, you ask. He looks you over. Maybe. I need 2 strong hands to lift planks and hammer braces, but I can't pay coin. Only dried apples, and not many. You mull it over, feeling hunger tug at your stomach. Dried apples won't last long, but they're something. Before you accept, someone else chimes in loudly. I'll do it for fewer apples. Competition. Wonderful. You step back. If people are underbidding food just to get work, things are worse than you realised. By early afternoon, your feet are tired, your back aches from walking, and your spirits are stuck somewhere in the moderately flattened category. You sit on the edge of the fountain, the one that used to sparkle in summer sun but now has a thin film of ice on its surface. You pull your coat tighter. You're thinking about heading home when an idea hits you. Try the next village. It's not that far. If you walk briskly, you could reach it by sundown. You debate it. On one hand, walking there means burning precious energy. On the other hand, staying here with no work won't solve anything. You weigh the decision for a long moment, then stand up. Your legs feel stubborn, but they move. You start walking toward the south road. Halfway there, you meet an older traveller carrying a heavy satchel. His boots look worn, his cheeks windburned. He pauses when he sees you. Heading south, he asks. Thinking about it, you reply. Work's scarce there too, he says. Too many looking, not enough offering. I tried 3 towns, only got half a loaf and a few dried berries. He lifts his satchel slightly as if to prove it. But if you're lucky, you might find a farm needing help with their animals. You thank him and continue walking. His warning adds weight to every step. A quirky tidbit floats into your mind. Some wandering labourers in 1816 offered to read letters or write them for illiterate families in exchange for food. You smile faintly to yourself, imagining trying that shtick here, though your handwriting is more sleepy chicken scratch than professional scribe. When you finally reach the next village, the atmosphere feels exactly like yours. Cold, tense, weary. The market is thin. The faces are tired. You find a small job patching a roof for an older man in exchange for a bowl of lukewarm stew. It tastes mostly of water and vague vegetables, but it warms your stomach and gives you strength. By dusk, with no more work available, you begin your walk back home. The wind picks up, stinging your ears. You wrap your scarf tighter and trudge on, watching your breath puff out in pale clouds. As the village comes into view, you feel the ache in your bones from the long day. Your hands are raw from hammering and splintered wood. Your stomach growls again, already hungry. You didn't earn much, but you earned something. And in a year like this, something is everything. You reach your door, open it, and let the warmth of your dying fire greet you. You sit heavily, rubbing your sore hands, and whisper to yourself, tomorrow, we try again. Because that's what survival looks like now. Not thriving, not planning, just trying. You wake before dawn the next day, stomach rumbling loud enough to make you wonder if it's trying to communicate in Morse code. You lie there for a moment, staring at the ceiling beams, listening to the wind scrape against the shutters. The fire has gone out again, of course it has, and the chill pushes you out of bed faster than any alarm clock ever could. You pull on your thickest socks, which sadly are no match for floorboards that seem hell-bent on impersonating glacier ice. As you move toward the kitchen, your mind drifts to the same question nagging you for days now. What are you going to eat? Not tomorrow, not next week, not in some hypothetical better season, but today. You rummage through your pantry and take stock. A few wrinkled turnips, half a sack of beans, a cracked jar of pickled something. You're not entirely sure what. But you decide maybe today isn't the day to investigate that mystery. There's also the garlic braid hanging on the wall, but honestly, you can't justify turning your breath into a weapon when food is scarce enough that conversations are practically diplomatic negotiations. You sigh and rub your temples. You need to stretch what little you have, which means it's time for the thing everyone in the region is starting to do: experiment with whatever survives the cold. You head outside to see what's still clinging stubbornly to life around your homestead. The air hits you like a slap, a cold, unfriendly reminder that summer has decided to ghost you entirely. But you push forward, searching your small plot for anything edible. The frost has killed most of the real crops, but tucked between stones and fence posts, a few strange survivors remain. Dandelions, for one. Not exactly fine dining, but the leaves are edible if you boil them long enough to erase the bitterness. Well, most of it. Maybe half. Okay, let's not lie. They taste like lawn disappointment, but they're food. There's also chickweed, surprisingly hearty in the cold. You've heard some herbalists swear by it. Mild, slightly sweet, and a decent filler for soups. You pluck a handful. It's not glamorous, but neither is starving. A mainstream historical fact comes to mind. In 1816, people across Europe and North America resorted to foraging wild plants to survive. Nettles, sorrel, cattail roots, even moss in extreme cases. You're not at moss-level desperation yet, but the year is young. As you gather your pitiful bundle of greens, you think back to something the travelling labourer said yesterday, about towns mixing whatever edible scraps they could find into meals. Some were even grinding up old rye stalks or leftover chaff, creating gritty, questionable porridge. You'd prefer to avoid that particular culinary adventure, but you understand the logic. A quirky tidbit you once overheard resurfaces. Someone claimed that eating roasted acorns can make you strong like a boar. The same person also believed tying a potato around your neck cures headaches, so scientific accuracy may not be his specialty. Still, you eye the oak tree near your fence. Maybe roasted acorns are worth a try, later. You return inside, dump your findings onto the table and begin sorting them. Leaves here, twigs there, dirt everywhere. A theme, really. You start cooking a thin broth, water, beans, and a handful of foraged greens. While it simmers, you poke at it skeptically. The smell is mild, earthy, a little sad, but decidedly edible. As the fire warms the room, you sit at the table and stare at the pot. This shouldn't be happening. You planted crops. You cared for your animals. You followed the seasons. But now you're improvising meals like a contestant on some cruel historical cooking show. Welcome back to Can You Eat That? The answer is probably yes. But should you? By midday, you decide to stretch your food supply even further by searching beyond your home. You trek toward the woods, basket in hand, scanning the ground for anything nature hasn't frozen solid. You spot a few mushrooms but avoid them, because if your luck is anything like this year's weather, you'd probably pick the poisonous ones. As you explore, you find wild sorrel, tart, lemony, refreshing. You grin slightly. It's not much, but it's a win. A tiny, leafy win. You pluck a handful and add it to your basket. Not far away, you find a patch of stinging nettles. Perfectly edible when cooked, entirely unpleasant when not. You wrap your sleeves around your hands and cut them carefully, muttering, "Please don't sting me, please don't sting me," like you're negotiating with a tiny green army. Historians still argue whether communities who relied heavily on wild plants during 1816 suffered more from malnutrition or from accidental poisonings due to unfamiliar foraging. You remind yourself to be careful, very careful. Back home, you boil everything together into one big pot. Chickweed, sorrel, dandelion leaves, a few late buds you found clinging to life. You stir, taste, grimace, and add a pinch of the remaining salt. It tastes marginally less like hot yard clippings now. Progress. As you eat your forage soup, you feel a strange combination of pride and sadness. Pride, because you managed to create something edible out of plants whose usual role in your life is get stuck to your socks. Sadness, because this meal, this humble, improvised survival stew, is becoming your new normal. The afternoon wears on. You check on your animals again, scratch your horse behind the ears, and reassure the chickens that yes, they are still valued members of the household. You gather a few eggs, small, fragile, precious. Then, as the sun dips, which is generous wording because the sun mostly smears itself weakly across the sky these days, you start preparing dinner. You slice the remaining turnip thin, mix it with softened nettles, and fry it over the fire. You call it a turnip hash to make yourself feel fancy. It mostly tastes like desperation with hints of ambition, but you eat every bite. Later, as you sit by the fire rubbing warmth into your hands, you think about the foods people once considered strange but edible. Bark bread, acorn meal, fish scales boiled into gelatin. None of that sounds appealing, but you finally understand why they did it. The world is colder, the crops are dying, the market is emptying, and you will have to eat whatever survives. You lean back, listening to the wind outside, letting the heat from the fire sink into your bones. Today you foraged, today you improvised, today you ate, and tomorrow you'll do it all again. You hear the rumours before you meet a single traveller that confirms them. Whispers drift into the village the way cold air seeps through a loose window frame. Quiet at first, then impossible to ignore. You're in the market again, bartering for a few handfuls of beans, when a woman mutters to her friend, "They say up north they're eating shoe leather." You blink. Shoe leather? You hope it's just an exaggeration, some dramatic metaphor. But then another voice chimes in, and in the coastal towns they're boiling seaweed just to keep their stomachs from aching. You trade a quick look with the vendor. Her eyes widen slightly. She's heard it too. You finish your transaction, 2 wooden spoons for a cup of beans, and tuck the beans carefully into your bag. As you walk through the square, you start listening more closely. Farmers talk in low voices. Older men shake their heads grimly. Women warn each other to stockpile whatever they can. Even the children seem to sense the tension. Their games have grown quieter, subdued. No more loud tag or chasing chickens, just murmured conversation and silent watching. A mainstream historical fact echoes in your mind. During 1816, hunger spread across vast regions. Grain shortages hit hardest in Europe and New England. In Switzerland, families starved. In Ireland, famine worsened already deep poverty. Prices spiked to levels unimaginable for most villagers. Many simply couldn't afford food, any food. You didn't think it could get that bad here. But rumours have a way of creeping under your skin, whispering possibilities you don't want to face. Later that morning you meet a traveller, a wiry man with sunken cheeks and a look in his eyes that tells you he's seen too much winter for one lifetime. He approaches the village slowly, leaning on a stick that looks like it could give out at any moment. You rush forward to help him because you know the look of someone who hasn't eaten properly in a long while. He accepts your arm with a weak nod. "Much obliged," he murmurs, voice thin. You guide him to a bench by the fountain, where the ice has finally melted just enough to drip steadily. You offer him a cup of water. He drinks gratefully, though his hands shake. When he's ready, he begins to talk. He came from a region 2 days north, he says, where the cold has been even more relentless. Frost every night, he mutters. Snow in June, hail in July, frost again in August. His expression twists painfully. Crops didn't stand a chance. You swallow. Is it true what they're saying? About people going hungry? His silence is answer enough, but he eventually adds, "Hunger makes people desperate. People eat things they shouldn't." He looks away, eyes glassy. Some families had to slaughter animals early, even the young ones. Others... He trails off. You don't push him. Nearby, 2 villagers listen closely, exchanging worried glances. The traveller speaks. Again, quieter. Historians still argue whether these storms are punishment or nature, or something volcanic from the other side of the world. He gives a weak chuckle. "I don't know about all that. I just know it's killing people." You help him to the local inn, where the keeper gives him a small portion of thin stew and a place near the fire. It's the best you can do, and you walk away feeling heavier than when you arrived. As you head home, the rumours keep swirling in your mind. Desperation up north, towns rationing food, entire communities abandoning their homes, children crying from hunger, traders robbed on the road for a bag of grain, people grinding dried weeds into flour, people boiling leather, people leaving everything behind because staying means starving. Back at your house, you stare at your pantry again. You see scarcity in every corner. You see the future, not tomorrow, not next week, but the trajectory you're on. You pick up a nearly empty jar of beans and your hands tremble. You head outside for fresh air, though fresh feels generous. The cold pinches your cheeks hard enough to wake you from your spiraling thoughts. You take a long, steadying breath. The skies are dull grey again, the kind of grey that makes you think sunlight is a myth passed down through generations. You decide to walk the fields, hoping movement will clear your mind. As you reach your plot, a gust of wind whips across the frozen soil. You crouch down and touch the earth. It's firm, unyielding, dead-looking. So this is how the rumours start, you say softly, half to yourself. Little failures becoming big ones. A joke bubbles up, weak, but something. If the weather keeps this up, maybe I'll start a new culinary trend. Frostbite fusion. You snort quietly at your own terrible joke, because humour is becoming a survival skill at this point. But the laughter fades quickly. Your breath fogs in the air, swirling like a ghost. You think about the people to the north. You think about the empty market stalls here. You think about Thomas and his family heading toward a future you can't predict. You think about the thin stew you ate last night and how little is left in your stores, and you realise something important. These rumours aren't distant warnings anymore. They're coming your way. By sunset, the sky takes on another eerie shade. Deep grey with streaks of red bleeding across the horizon. It reminds you of spilled ink, or a bruise. You watch it silently, wondering how many more strange skies you'll see before this year ends. As you head inside, you make one vow quietly, firmly. You will not wait until hunger pushes you into desperation. You'll prepare now, whatever it takes, because the rumours, they're beginning to sound like prophecy. You don't plan it. Nobody does. It just sort of happens one evening when the cold feels sharper than usual, and the mood in the village sits heavy on everyone like an extra layer of unwelcome frost. You've been foraging and rationing for weeks now, and the weariness shows on every face you pass. People have stopped pretending things are normal. Even the children's laughter, once the last stubborn sound of a hope, has thinned out like everything else. Then someone suggests it. A simple idea, a fragile one, a risky one. A shared meal, Mrs. Alden whispers as you help her carry a bundle of sticks toward her home. Just one night where we all bring what we can. No bartering, no arguing, just something warm, together. You blink at her. You're tired, you're hungry, you're anxious. But the idea strikes something inside you, something you haven't felt in weeks. Solidarity. Yeah, you say softly. A community stew. You're not sure who spreads the word, but within hours the idea flows through the village like a cautious flame. People poke their heads out of their homes. They exchange uncertain looks. They consider what they can spare, if anything at all. But slowly the idea takes root. By late afternoon, someone clears a spot in the commons and sets up a large iron cauldron over a fire pit. The pot is old, blackened, dented in places, and honestly looks like it has witnessed more history than most people alive. Its presence feels comforting, like it remembers good meals from better years. You arrive with your contribution, a handful of chickweed, a small scoop of beans, and one precious egg you've been saving. It feels like a lot and nothing at the same time. People drift in one by one, bundles in hand, some large, some tiny, some almost embarrassingly meagre. But nobody judges, not tonight. A mainstream historical fact whispers in your memory. During the real year without summer, many communities held victual gatherings, informal potluck-style events where people pooled their remaining food to keep morale alive. It wasn't enough to erase hunger, but it kept the spirit of community from collapsing completely. You feel that same spirit flickering here. Mrs. Alden brings a small hunk of salted pork, thin, barely enough to flavour the broth, but you hear a few people gasp softly when she drops it into the cauldron. Meat has become rare enough to feel like treasure. Old Mr. Hill brings a few shriveled carrots. Sorry, they look defeated, he mutters. You shrug. We all look defeated, you whisper back. The carrot goes in. Children toss in herbs they gathered. A teenage boy contributes 2 potatoes he found buried deep in his cellar. A woman adds a handful of barley grains. Even the innkeeper shows up, carrying a pinch of pepper. Pepper, which sparks such immediate joy you'd think he dropped gold into the pot. The mixture begins to bubble, slowly. Steam rises into the cold evening air, carrying scents none of you have smelled in far too long. Warmth, spice, comfort. You inhale deeply, letting your shoulders finally relax. As the stew cooks, people gather around the fire. You hear low murmurs, stories about their worst days, memories of warmer summers, worries about the coming months. You hear laughter too, thin at first, then stronger, because humans are stubborn and will laugh even when the world feels like it's ending. The wind is calmer tonight, almost respectful of what you're all trying to do. Someone nudges you. It's Thomas's daughter's friend, one of the kids left behind. She holds a small wooden bowl. "Do you think they're okay?" she asks quietly. You know who she means, Thomas and his family, wherever the road has taken them. You kneel down. "I hope so," you tell her. "And maybe they're having their own stew somewhere tonight." She smiles a little at that and runs off to help stir the pot, her tiny hands gripping the wooden ladle with determined seriousness. As darkness settles, lanterns appear one by one, glowing warm against the encroaching cold. Their soft yellow light reflects in the steam rising from the stew, making it look almost magical. Then the moment arrives. The stew is ready. People line up quietly, not pushing, not grabbing, not complaining, just waiting. You watch each person take a bowlful with gratitude so raw it makes your throat tighten. The portion is modest, barely half a bowl each, but it's warm, hearty, and infinitely better than what most have eaten in days. When it's your turn, the ladle dips deep and pours out something surprisingly fragrant. You step back, holding the wooden bowl close to your chest like it's a sacred relic. You sit on a log by the fire, lift the spoon, and taste the stew. It's not fancy, it's not rich, but it's real food, flavorful, warm, and shared. You take another spoonful, then another. The heat spreads through your body like a memory of summer. A quirky historical tidbit enters your mind unbidden. Some villages used to say that a pot shared by many hands holds the strength of all hearts combined. Tonight, you believe it. Conversations rise around you, quiet, hopeful. Someone tells a story about seeing a deer in the woods earlier, though too far to hunt. Another mentions strange new birds migrating into the area, confusing everyone. Historians still argue whether unusual wildlife patterns were a direct result of the volcanic haze or just coincidental. But either way, these tiny shifts feel like the world is trying to rearrange itself in real time. You finish your stew slowly, savouring each bite. The warmth fills your chest, easing the knot that's been sitting there for weeks. You glance around at the faces illuminated by firelight, tired, thin, worried, but united. Eventually the cauldron empties. People help clean up, carrying bowls home or staying to chat softly near the embers. The night feels gentler than most, not warmer. Nature isn't feeling generous, but gentler in spirit. Before you head home, you look at the cauldron one last time. It hangs suspended over glowing coals, steam fading into the night sky. You touch it gently, feeling the heat through the metal. For the first time in months, you feel something close to hope. Not the loud, confident kind. Not the kind that promises everything will be fine. Just the quiet kind. The kind that whispers, "You're not facing this alone." The morning after the community meal, you feel something different. Not in the weather, which remains as faithful to misery as ever, but in yourself. Maybe it's the warmth from last night's stew lingering in your bones. Maybe it's the quiet comfort of knowing your neighbours are fighting the same fight. Whatever it is, you carry it with you as you step into the cold air, and immediately feel reality slap you across the face again. Because today is trading day, and trading day now feels like a test of survival, diplomacy, improvisation, and emotional endurance all at once. You bundle up, tuck a small assortment of items under your arm, some leftover nails, a pair of worn gloves, a jar of dried herbs, and head toward the market. You're not looking to profit. You're looking to stretch your supplies, maybe pick up something useful. Anything. But when you arrive, you can tell instantly that the mood has shifted again, and not in a friendly direction. The stalls aren't just sparse now, they're stripped. Not bare exactly, but close enough that you see more wood than goods. People wander the aisles like ghosts, moving slowly, eyes scanning hungrily for opportunities. The cheerful greetings of the warmer months have been replaced with clipped nods, tight mouths and quick glances that flick between friendliness and quiet desperation. You pass a stall where a woman is trying to trade 2 hand-knitted scarves for a handful of oats. The vendor shakes his head regretfully. Oats are worth more than gold now. Her shoulders slump. You move on and approach the leatherworker who used to have a table covered in saddles, belts, pouches. Today, he has 3 belts, a torn satchel, and a single pair of cracked boots. He greets you with a tired smile. Looking to trade? You show him your items. He examines the nails carefully, runs a finger along the glove's seams, sniffs the jar of dried herbs like a suspicious cat. I can give you... He pauses, thinking. Half a loaf of bread. Half a loaf. You haven't seen bread up close in days. You agree before he changes his mind. He hands you the bread, still warm from being reheated near a fire. You hold it like it's fragile, precious, breakable. Because it is. You tuck it safely into your bag and keep walking, feeling a tiny sliver of relief. But that relief doesn't last long. You overhear 2 men arguing at a nearby stall. That's not a fair trade. It's the only trade I can make. You're robbing people. Then don't buy. Their voices escalate until the vendor slams his crate shut and storms off. The other man curses under his breath. Conflict is becoming more common here. Trading has shifted from polite negotiation to barely restrained tension. A mainstream historical fact surfaces. During the actual year without summer, bartering replaced currency in many regions. People traded tools for food, clothing for grain, childcare for meals. Some even traded labour for shelter, or precious keepsakes for a chance at survival. You're seeing the same thing unfold here, play by play. You approach another stall and see Mrs. Hale clutching a small bundle of wool. She offers it to a grain merchant, voice trembling. Please, anything. The merchant hesitates. Not because he's cruel, but because he has so little left himself. He finally relents and hands her a tiny sack of flour, barely enough for a single loaf. She accepts it with shaking hands, whispering thanks until her voice breaks. You look away, feeling like you've intruded on something painful. You circle back through the square, scanning for something else you might need. Firewood, salt. Maybe a little dried meat if you're extremely lucky. But every time you find something useful, the price, whether in coin or trade, stings. You spot a man selling kindling at a stall near the well. You need kindling like fish need water. You approach him and ask, "What do you want for a bundle?" 2 candles, he replies without hesitation. 2 candles? You nearly laugh. Candles are precious, especially when the nights stretch longer and colder. But so is wood. You stand there for a moment, calculating. Wood warms you. Candles guide you. Which do you need more right now? You grit your teeth and make the trade. As you walk away with the bundle of wood, you hear a woman behind you sigh in envy. You feel guilty for having made the trade before she could. But the truth is, this is survival now. And survival is messy. A quirky tidbit pops into your mind. Something a travelling peddler once joked about. In hard times, people will trade 3 chickens for a needle and 1 needle for a miracle. You didn't understand it back then. You do now. Perspective shifts when scarcity rewrites the rules. Near the edge of the market, you find something unexpected. A man offering repairs in exchange for food. He sharpens knives, fixes broken buckles, patches torn clothing. His tools are old but well cared for. You realise you've got a cracked pot at home and a torn strap on your satchel. If you can afford it, this could help. "What do you charge?" you ask. He studies you, then shrugs. "Whatever you think it's worth." You blink. In a world where everyone is clutching their belongings like they're sacred relics, this man is letting people decide his payment. It feels almost heroic. You decide to trade a small slice of the bread you earned earlier. It hurts to part with it. Your stomach even protests loudly, but you do it anyway. He repairs your satchel carefully, sewing it with steady hands. When he's done, he hands it back with a nod and you give him the bread. His eyes widen and he whispers, "Thank you." You walk away feeling lighter in a way you haven't felt in weeks. You head home as the sky darkens into another volcanic haze. The cold nips at your fingers, but you carry new supplies, new repairs, and a strange sense that you've navigated the chaos as best you could. Trading is no longer a convenience. It's survival. It's negotiation. It's balancing the needs of today with the fear of tomorrow. Inside your house, you store everything carefully, piece by piece. The bread, the wood, the fixed satchel, the flour. You sit at the table, letting your breath steady. Historians still argue whether times like these bring communities together or tear them apart. Tonight, as you stare at the items you managed to trade for, you think the answer is both. Because survival now depends not just on what you have, but what you're willing to give up, and who you're willing to trust. The next morning feels heavier than usual, like the cold has learned a new trick and decided to sit squarely on your shoulders. You step outside, rubbing warmth into your hands, only to find a small group gathered near the church. Voices rise and fall, low, tense, emotional. You wander closer, pulled by curiosity and the way people keep glancing toward the steeple, as if expecting answers to fall from it like condensation. As you approach, you recognize the preacher, Reverend Fletcher, standing at the center of the group, coat buttoned tightly, face flushed with fervor. He holds his worn Bible open, though the wind keeps flipping the pages, as if nature itself wants to interrupt whatever he's about to say. You hover at the edge, unsure whether to join, observe, or pretend you're just passing by. "Friends," the Reverend begins, voice carrying across the frosted square, "we are living through a trial. The skies darken, the ground freezes, and the crops fail. But this is not without meaning." A few people nod. A few roll their eyes. A few look desperately for meaning, because meaning is sometimes more comforting than the truth. You stay quiet, arms crossed. Reverend Fletcher continues, "This cold, this strange weather, it may be a sign, a warning. Perhaps we have strayed from the path, and the Lord calls us back with a stern hand." You exhale softly. Here we go. A mainstream historical fact floats through your mind. During 1816, many communities interpreted the eerie skies and failed crops as divine punishment. Some believed the apocalypse was near. Others preached repentance, fasting, or communal prayer to ward off what they believed was God's wrath. Fear breeds interpretation, and interpretation sometimes becomes doctrine. A woman next to you whispers, "Maybe he's right. Maybe we angered something." You're about to correct her because you're fairly certain the only thing anyone angered this year is the weather, when someone else shouts from the back, "Or maybe it's just the volcano." Every head turns. It's Mr. Alden, usually quiet, usually polite, now looking irritated enough to kick a frostbitten pumpkin. "There was an eruption. Far away," he explains loudly. "I heard travellers talk about it. A mountain exploded, sent ash into the sky. Could be blocking the sun." You blink, impressed. Mr. Alden offering a scientific explanation is like a chicken offering legal advice. Unexpected but appreciated. Reverend Fletcher's jaw tightens. "A volcano halfway around the world does not dictate the will of the Lord," he says sharply. Someone else calls out, "Historians still argue whether natural events carry spiritual meaning, or if they're just nature doing nature things." "Exactly," you shout, then immediately regret shouting because now everyone is staring at you. The Reverend sighs, turning a page as if trying to find the exact verse that'll prove you wrong. "Whatever its cause," he says more gently, "we must remain steadfast. We must interpret the signs. We must prepare." You shift your weight, watching the villagers wrestle with two competing explanations, divine, natural, or maybe a messy combination of both. Humans love neat answers. The world, unfortunately, is not in a neat answer mood. The conversation heats up. A man in a patch coat raises his hand timidly. "If this is punishment, what do we do? Pray harder? Fast? Give offerings?" His voice trembles. Another villager shakes her head. "And if it's the volcano, what then? We can't stop ash from floating." You feel yourself slipping into that internal commentary mode, your default these days. Here we are, you think, hungry, cold, confused, and now debating cosmic meaning because the world turned the thermostat down without warning. The Reverend suggests a day of prayer and contemplation. Mr. Alden counters with a day of clearing ash from rooftops, not because he actually knows if there's ash, but because he's determined to be the village's unofficial scientist now. The debate becomes a seesaw. Faith, science, fear, logic, emotion, survival. Finally, the Reverend closes his Bible and sighs. Interpretations aside, he says, what matters is how we treat each other during hardship. We must stay united. It's a good sentiment. Even you nod. Someone proposes lighting candles every evening to push back the darkness. Someone else suggests communal study, reading aloud stories that lift morale. Another suggests singing hymns together. Another proposes simply gathering around fires for warmth and conversation. Small, human things. Normal things in abnormal times. You slip away from the crowd quietly, needing space to think. Walking home, you mull over what you just witnessed. Part of you finds comfort in faith communities pulling together. Another part finds comfort in scientific explanations. And another part, the exhausted one, just wants a warm summer day again. A quirky tidbit you once heard surfaces. Some ancient cultures believed strange weather meant spirits were shaking out their blankets in the sky. For a fleeting moment, you imagine giant sky beings giving their laundry a good snap and accidentally throwing the world into chaos. You chuckle under your breath. It's a ridiculous image. But honestly, ridiculous makes more sense than anything lately. You stop in front of your house, look up at the sky. Today it's a muted grey with a faint rusty rim at the horizon. You can almost feel it staring back with an expression that says, "Don't look at me, I'm just the messenger." Inside, you light a candle and sit quietly, thinking about the villagers' reactions. Faith can soothe, science can explain, fear can divide. But community might carry you through. And as strange as it sounds, you're grateful for the debate, because it shows people still care enough to argue, to search, to question, to hope. Historians still argue whether faith or reason mattered more during the year without summer. But they all agree on one thing. When the world feels like it's breaking, people look for meaning in the cracks. The next few days blur together in a rhythm you're starting to know too well. Wake in the cold, tend to the animals, ration what little food you have, and squint suspiciously at the sky as if it might finally explain itself. But today something different happens. Something subtle, but enough to pull your attention away from the daily grind. A pair of travelling scholars arrives in the village. Scholars. Here. In this weather. In these conditions. It feels almost absurd. Like spotting two owls wearing reading glasses and debating philosophy in your yard. They wander into the square just after midday, wrapped in cloaks dusted with frost, carrying bags stuffed with notes, journals, and oddly enough, a brass measuring device that looks like a cross between a compass and a torture instrument. Villagers gather quickly, not because scholars are rare, though they are, but because distraction is rare. And you, just as curious as everyone else, drift closer. One scholar is tall and thin with watery blue eyes. The other is shorter, rounder, with ink stains permanently embedded in his fingertips. They introduce themselves as Mr. Lyle and Mr. Harrington, natural philosophers travelling between towns to collect atmospheric observations. That phrase alone earns them about 20 confused stares. Mr. Harrington clears his throat awkwardly. "We're investigating anomalies in climate patterns across the region," he explains. "We hope to understand the cause." Someone in the crowd mutters, "Cause? The cause is God." Another counters, "No, it's the volcano, obviously." Someone else whispers, "Maybe it's witches," which earns a quick elbow from their friend. You can't tell whether the scholars look amused, concerned, or simply cold. Mr. Lyle begins setting up his odd brass instrument. It has spinning parts, a tiny glass vial filled with something red, and a small hinged plate that clicks when he tilts it. He calls it an atmospheric thermometer. You call it suspicious. He squints at the sky. Light refraction appears heavily distorted, he notes to no one in particular, scribbling in a notebook. Mr. Harrington nods. Smoke particles at high altitude, no doubt. Possibly volcanic. But the pattern is unusual. His voice is reverent, like he's talking about an elusive creature rather than the thing currently ruining your food supply. A mainstream historical fact enters your mind. Scientists of the period did record bizarre atmospheric conditions, dimmed sunlight, lower temperatures, dry fog, and a strange quality to the air. But back then, they didn't yet know Mount Tambora's eruption was responsible. Some theorized sunspots. Others believed in shifting magnetic fields. Some even blamed electrical imbalance in the atmosphere, whatever that meant. The villagers pepper the scholars with questions. Is this dangerous? Will our crops return? Is this temporary? Are we all going to freeze to death? Mr. Harrington raises both hands defensively. We don't know yet. That's why we're gathering data. People groan. Data. Wonderful. Can data warm your house? Feed your animals? Bake a loaf of bread? You're fairly sure it cannot. Still, their presence stirs something inside you. Curiosity. A flicker of intellectual interest you haven't felt since before the cold stole your brain's willingness to think about anything not related to survival. You step closer and ask, "What do you believe is happening?" Mr. Lyle wipes his glasses and says, "Historians still argue whether climactic irregularities are tied to distant geologic events or cycles within the Earth itself, but," he gestures toward the reddened sky, This feels global, too widespread for coincidence." Mr. Harrington adds, "We've heard rumours of failed harvests in the south, frozen vineyards, snowstorms farther west, even reports from across the ocean of dimmed skies." He lowers his voice. "Something enormous caused this." You nod slowly, absorbing their words. Something enormous. That phrase rings through your mind like a bell. You picture a monstrous enemy looming beyond the horizon. Except this enemy isn't a beast, or a rival nation, or anything tangible you can point to. It's the sky itself, the air, the temperature, the very thing you rely on to live. The scholars pack up their tools and prepare to move on, but the villagers hesitate to let them leave. People cling to them, not physically, but with questions, pleas, expectations. In a time like this, anyone who seems remotely knowledgeable becomes a beacon, even if their knowledge comes with no solutions. "Can't you stay?" someone asks. "We must continue gathering observations," Mr. Harrington replies gently. "To understand what's happening, we need a broader picture." A villager scoffs softly. "Understanding doesn't keep us warm." "Understanding," Mr. Lyle says quietly, "is the first step toward adapting." You let that sentence settle in your mind. Adapting. Not changing the world, not fixing the world, just learning to live in the world as it is, bent, tilted, broken. As the scholars move on, their footprints pressing into the frost-covered earth, the villagers disperse. Some keep muttering about divine punishment, others whisper about ash clouds or collapsing climates. A few just shake their heads and head home, too hungry or tired to care about theories. You walk back slowly, thoughtful. Inside your house, you sit by the fire and stare into the flames. You think about faith, science, community and fear, all swirling like the volcanic haze above you. You think about the scholars and their instruments measuring, the sky like it's a puzzle waiting to be solved. And then a quirky tidbit flashes into your mind. People in some regions believed strange weather meant the sun was sick. They said it caught an illness and needed rest. You smile faintly. If the sun is sick, you think, it's certainly staying home from work a little too often these days. You settle deeper into your chair. Historians still argue about the causes of the year without summer, but for you, the cause matters less than the consequence. The cold is here. The world is changing. And now, maybe, you understand a little more of the why, even if the answer doesn't warm your bones. You don't expect it to come so soon. None of you do. There's still a shred of hope floating around the village that maybe, just maybe, the weather will shift or the sky will lighten, or summer will finally remember it has an appointment here. But hope has been unreliable lately, and today it proves that point with brutal efficiency. You wake before dawn to a sound you haven't heard in months. A familiar whistle, a low icy moan slipping through the cracks in your shutters. You lie still, staring at the ceiling, your breath fogging the cold air above you. That sound. It shouldn't be happening now. It's too early, too soon, too cruel. You pull on your coat, brace yourself and open the door. The wind hits you immediately, sharp, bitter, slicing across your cheeks like tiny frozen knives. And the worst part? It feels like winter again. Not chilly, not cold, winter. The kind of cold that has weight and intention, the kind with teeth. You step outside, boots crunching on hard ground. A thin crust of ice covers everything. Your buckets, your tools, even the rope on the fence post. You run your hand across the frozen surface and feel the sting of reality. The harsh season is returning early. Very early. A mainstream historical fact echoes through your mind. In 1816, frost struck again in August in many regions. Hard frost. The kind that kills crops overnight and sends entire communities spiralling. That second winter arrived out of season, unexpected and devastating. You're living that right now. You hurry to the barn, breath coming in frantic puffs. The animals huddle together, restless and confused. Your horse stomps, letting out a frustrated whinny that sounds almost like a plea. The sheep press into a tight circle. The cows' breaths form thick clouds that hang in the air like ghosts. You whisper soothing nonsense as you break the ice in the troughs again, hands aching from the cold. When you step back outside, the wind gusts hard enough to make you stagger. You wrap your coat tighter and head toward the fields. You already know what you'll find, but seeing it still punches the air from your lungs. Your crops, your stubborn, repeatedly replanted, hopeful little crops, are frozen solid. Leaves curled stiff, stems cracked, soil hard as stone. The delicate green that represents your future is now coated in glittering frost, like tiny gravestones under the pale morning sun. You kneel, fingertips brushing a leaf. It snaps off, brittle. You close your eyes. Around you, muffled voices drift across the fields. Other villagers are discovering the same fate. Someone curses loudly, someone else sobs. A child asks their mother why the plants are sleeping again, and the mother's voice breaks when she tries to answer. You stand slowly, watching your neighbours gather in small, devastated clusters. No one knows what to say. When Reverend Fletcher arrives, his breath catches. "Heavens," he murmurs. Mrs. Alden shakes her head. "Not again. Not again." She kneels in the soil and digs with her hands as if desperate to find some hidden warmth. There is none. A man near the edge of the field mutters, "Historians still argue whether cold snaps come in waves or if nature just hates us personally." You choke out a humourless laugh. It's not a joke, not really, but at this point sarcastic speculation might be all that holds some of you together. The wind howls louder, kicking up tiny shards of frost. The skies are dull, heavy grey, the kind of colour that has no emotion left in it, just resignation. You hear the town bell ring, a slow, solemn toll. Not for a death, not for a gathering, but for a warning. The cold has returned. Prepare. But prepare for what? What do you prepare when nature breaks the rules? By late afternoon, the air grows even colder. Your breath becomes thick, lingering longer in front of you. You start gathering firewood, moving quickly, because you can tell tonight will be brutal. As you haul the bundles toward your house, you notice clouds forming, dark, low, and heavy. Snow in August. You watch in disbelief as flakes drift lazily from the sky. Just a few at first, then more. Each one landing softly on your coat, your hair, your eyelashes. You blink them away, but they keep falling. Someone behind you shouts, "This can't be happening," but it is. Again. You pull your coat hood up and hurry inside. You light the fire, feed it, coax it, beg it to stay alive. The flames catch, glowing weakly at first, then growing stronger. You sit in front of it, hands outstretched, feeling the warmth seep slowly into your skin. But warmth doesn't erase the truth outside. Tonight will kill whatever the frost spared. Tomorrow will reveal new losses. Your food stores will stretch thinner. Your animals will struggle harder. Your village will inch closer to decisions nobody wants to make. A quirky tidbit drifts through your mind. Some old folklore claims that early winter winds are the breaths of restless spirits returning too soon. You exhale sharply at the absurdity, then immediately acknowledge it makes as much sense as anything else in this bizarre year. You sit back, listening to the wind rattle the shutters, watching the snow gather outside your window. It falls silently, steadily, mercilessly. You think of Thomas's family and wonder if they escaped this. You think of your neighbours and wonder how many will leave after this. You think of yourself and wonder how many more surprises the year still holds. The harsh winter has returned early, too early, and you know deep in your bones, this is only going to get harder. You don't even notice the sickness at first. Not because you're careless, but because it creeps in the same way the cold did. Quietly, patiently, waiting until everyone is too exhausted, too hungry, or too distracted to fight it off. You wake one morning to a cough echoing from a neighbour's house, muffled but persistent. You tell yourself it's just the cold air clawing at people's lungs again. Happens every year, right? Except this isn't like every year. Nothing is like every year. By midday you hear another cough from farther down the road, then another, then two more. Different houses, different families, same sharp hacking sound. It's not loud, but it carries through the frosted air with a clarity that makes your chest tighten. You try to ignore it at first. You tend to your animals, break ice in the troughs, check the barn shutters, sweep frost from the doorstep. But no matter what you do, that cough keeps following you around like a ghost you can't shake. Then you see it. Mrs. Hale, usually sturdy as an oak, walks slowly across the square, wrapped in 3 shawls and still shivering. Her skin looks pale, her lips nearly blue. She stops halfway to the well and bends over, coughing until she has to brace herself on her knees. When she straightens up, you see fear in her eyes. Not the mild worry everyone's been living with. Real fear. You walk toward her. "You all right?" you ask gently. She shakes her head weakly. "I don't know," she whispers. "Can't get warm. Can't catch my breath." She coughs again, deep, rattling. You help her to the well and draw water, but she barely manages a sip before turning away. She murmurs a thank you and heads back home slowly, each step more unsteady than the last, and that's when it hits you. The village isn't just cold, hungry or scared now. It's getting sick. A mainstream historical fact drifts into your thoughts, like an unwelcome reminder. During the year without summer, outbreaks of illness swept through weakened communities. Malnutrition, poor sanitation, and constant exposure to cold left immune systems shattered. Dysentery, fevers, respiratory infections, and summer agues hit places already on the brink. Your village is becoming one of them. As you head toward the market, such as it still exists, you see more signs. A child curled against her mother's chest, cheeks flushed, coughing softly. A man sitting on a bench with a blanket wrapped around him, shivering violently despite the midday hour. Another villager leaning on the wall, eyes hollow, breath ragged. You stop in your tracks, feeling the first sting of dread. Inside your chest, something whispers. If sickness spreads, if people can't work, if the crops are gone, if the livestock are failing. You swallow hard and force the thoughts away. Near the centre of the square, Reverend Fletcher is speaking with urgency, though not his usual fiery tone. More gentle, more grave. "Must. Stay warm," he's saying. "Keep indoors whenever possible. Share firewood if you can. If symptoms worsen, send for help." Mr. Alden, now the resident's scientific voice, chimes in. "It's likely the cold. Prolonged exposure weakens the lungs. Historians still argue whether volcanic dust can worsen breathing, but what do we do?" Someone interrupts. He falters, looking helpless. "Stay warm, stay fed, avoid smoke, avoid damp." Advice that's easy to give and nearly impossible to follow when the world insists on freezing every corner of your life. You walk home, uneasy. The cold gnaws at you. The sickness gnaws deeper. Inside, your fire still flickers. You sit close, absorbing the warmth with a desperation that would have embarrassed you a year ago. But survival has a way of stripping pride away like old paint. You boil water, add what herbs you have left, some mint, a touch of dried thyme. You sip and tell yourself it'll help. It probably won't, but the warmth feels good. Later you visit your closest neighbours, checking on them quietly. Most insist they're fine, even when they clearly aren't. Humans cling to denial like it's a blanket. You meet Mr. Bracken hunched near his door, wheezing. He waves you off. "Just the cold," he rasps. "Been through worse." You know that's a lie. You help him inside anyway, stoke his fire, and leave some wood by his hearth. He doesn't thank you, too proud, but his eyes soften. A quirky tidbit floats into your mind. Some communities in 1816 believed placing heated stones wrapped in cloth against the chest could chase out the frost spirit in the lungs. Honestly? At this point you consider trying it yourself. Desperate times, desperate folklore. As dusk falls, the coughing grows louder across the village. Faint echoes from houses, soft, painful reminders that the people around you, your community, are thinning. Not dying, not yet, but thinning, weakening, taking on that grey, hollow look of bodies that need warmth and food and comfort and have none to spare. You sit by your window, watching lanterns flicker in the distance. Their glow wavers in the wind like candles inside a draughty chapel. You think about how sickness doesn't need an invitation. It slips through cracks. It rides on the breath. It settles where fear already lives. And in a year like this, fear is everywhere. You press your fingers to your forehead, closing your eyes. You're not sick, not yet. But you feel the fatigue, the chill, the heaviness in your bones. You push it down, telling yourself you don't have time to fall ill. You have animals to tend, wood to chop, water to fetch, food to forage. If you stop, everything stops. You lean back, listening to the wind outside, listening to the coughing inside neighbouring homes, listening to your own heartbeat thudding in your ears. Winter arrived early, illness followed quickly, and now you're caught in a tightening circle. You open your eyes and whisper to the quiet room, I have to stay healthy. I have to. Because the cold is one enemy, hunger is another. But sickness is the one that moves fastest. And tonight, it feels closer than ever. You wake in the middle of the night because your toes are numb. Not regular numb, alarmingly numb, the kind of numb that makes you sit upright thinking, okay, that's it, I'm officially turning into a popsicle. You fumble for the blanket, pull it tighter, but the cold has already slithered inside like an unwelcome roommate who pays no rent and steals all the warmth. You try to go back to sleep, but the wind is howling through the cracks in the walls with a kind of gleeful malice. It whips around the house, rattling shutters, tugging at the roof, slipping under the doorframe in thin, icy fingers. You finally sigh, throw the covers off, and light a candle. Because if you're going to be awake at this ungodly hour, you might as well at least see what the cold is plotting. The room glows faintly, and that's when you notice it. A thin layer of frost creeping along the inside of the window. Inside. You touch it with your fingertip, then immediately regret touching it with your fingertip. Well, you mutter, that's new. You drag yourself to the fire and poke the embers, trying to revive them. They cough out a few sparks, tiny, sad ones, but eventually stir enough flame to thaw the numbness in your fingers. The crackling sound comforts you. Fire is becoming your closest friend these days, and also the friend you constantly worry about, because if it goes out, so do you. When morning finally drags itself into existence, you shuffle outside to check the state of things. The world is coated in frost so thick it looks like powdered sugar. If powdered sugar were capable of emotionally devastating entire farming communities. You start your daily routine, but the cold complicates everything. Water freezes instantly. Tools stick to your gloves. Even the air feels heavier, as though you're walking through invisible snowdrifts. That's when you realize you need new ways to stay warm, not just the usual layering, not just a bigger fire, something creative, something borderline ridiculous, something you'll never admit to doing if humanity ever returns to normal summertime temperatures. So you begin your experiments. First attempt, 2 pairs of socks, plus stuffing dried grass between them. It works, kind of. Your feet feel warmer, but you also sound like a scarecrow with every step. Second attempt, wrapping hot stones in cloth and sticking them inside your coat pockets. This one actually works really well, until one of the stones shifts and you yelp loudly enough that your nearest neighbour pokes his head out thinking you stepped on a nail or saw a ghost. You wave him off. You do not explain the burning hot rock strapped to your torso. Third attempt, a scarf wrapped around your head so aggressively that only your eyes remain visible. You catch sight of yourself in a window reflection and burst out laughing. You look like a winter spirit who disapproves of everyone's life choices. But ridiculous or not, these attempts help. The cold is relentless, but so are you. As you experiment, you remember a mainstream historical fact. In 1816, people invented all sorts of improvised warming methods. Bundles of heated sand, makeshift stoves, layers of wool stuffed with straw, even lining clothes with old newspaper when fabric ran out. Some families slept in shifts to save firewood. Some crowded into single rooms. Some closed off entire floors of their homes to conserve heat. You're living that improvisational creativity now. By afternoon, you see other villagers testing their own ideas. Mrs. Alden is wearing 2 skirts, a quilt, and what appears to be the remains of a curtain. Mr. Hill tied a wool blanket across his chest like some kind of domestic superhero. A group of children are running around in clothes so layered they look like round, waddling bundles with legs. The town begins sharing tricks. Put warm ash in a sock and use it as a hand warmer. Stuff straw under the beds. Sleep with your animals if you have to. Someone swears that tucking a heated brick into your blankets is life-changing. Someone else claims onions keep your feet warm if you put them under your bed. A third person tries it and announces the only thing onions warm is your sense of regret. A quirky tidbit floats into your mind. Supposedly, some Europeans in cold years believed sleeping with baked potatoes under the covers could invite the fire spirit. You laugh softly, honestly. At this point, you'd invite any spirit willing to raise the temperature. As the day wears on, the cold intensifies. People hurry along the roads, heads down, arms wrapped tight around their bodies. Every conversation starts with a shiver and ends with someone saying, "It can't stay like this. Can it?" You spend part of the afternoon sealing cracks along your walls using a mixture of mud and straw. Your fingers freeze, but the effort pays off. When the next gust of wind blows, less air seeps in. Small victory. Inside, you move your bedding closer to the hearth. No shame. Survival aesthetics. When evening arrives, you heat a pot of water, not for cooking, but to pour into jars and use as makeshift bed warmers. You line them along your cot, wrap yourself tightly in blankets, and listen to the howling outside. As you settle in, the fire flickering in the corner, you realize something important. The world may be cold, but you're getting smarter, more adaptable, better at fighting back in small, clever ways. Historians still argue whether people of 1816 survived because of resilience, fortune, or sheer stubbornness. You suspect it was all three. You shift under the blankets, feeling the warmth from the jars seep into your legs. Today, you learned how to stay warm. Tomorrow, you'll learn something else, and the day after that, who knows? But for now, wrapped in your fort of blankets and questionable ingenuity, you allow yourself one rare thought. Maybe, just maybe, you're stronger than this cold. The next morning you wake with a strange sensation, something unfamiliar, something suspiciously close to comfort. Not full comfort. Let's not get dramatic, but a tiny seed of it. Your improvised heating tricks worked better than expected. The jars of warm water kept your legs from turning into icicles. The straw-insulated socks made your feet feel less like frozen bread loaves, and your monstrosity of blankets successfully buried you under a mountain of warmth. It's the closest thing to a good night's sleep you've had in weeks. You stretch, yawn, and then immediately wince as the cold air kisses your face. Still freezing, still relentless. But as you step outside and crunch across the frost-covered ground, something else becomes clear too. Even in a year like this, especially in a year like this, small joys still exist. You don't notice them right away. They hide. They whisper instead of shout. But today, you feel more attuned to them, as though your brain is begging for anything that isn't doom and gloom. You start with the animals. When you open the barn door, your horse flicks its ears and nudges your arm lightly. An affectionate gesture you rarely get these days. For a moment you smile, a real smile. Because even in the cold, even when feed is scarce, that gentle nudge reminds you that connection hasn't frozen over. Your chickens cluck with renewed energy, hopping around as if performing a morning roll call. They still look offended by the weather, but when one of them lays a small precious egg, you whisper, "You're a hero," and mean it. The egg is warm in your hand. You hold it for a long moment, savouring the simple comfort of warmth radiating from life. A mainstream historical fact pops into your mind. During the year without summer, diaries and letters often mention the tiniest bright moments. Music played around hearthfires, unexpected births of animals, reunions with travelling relatives, small harvest victories. People clung to these things like floating debris in rough seas. Maybe that's what today is about. You head toward the village, hoping to trade the egg for something useful, or maybe just to see other faces and feel less alone. The air is crisp, but not painfully so. Your breath rises in steady plumes, your boots crunch rhythmically, and despite everything the world is doing wrong, your body feels capable. As you near the square, you hear it. Soft humming. A woman at the well is humming a tune. Not a sad one, not a tired one, but a gentle melody. You pause. It's been so long since you heard music, you almost forgot what it feels like. She notices you listening and blushes. "Sorry," she murmurs. "Just trying to keep my spirits up." "Don't. Apologize," you say. "It's nice." Because it is. More than nice. It's a reminder that creativity survives even in famine. Nearby, two children chase each other, bundled so thickly they look like waddling snowmen. They laugh breathlessly, their voices tinkling through the cold air like little bells. One slips and falls into a heap of snow, laughing even harder. You laugh too. It's impossible not to. For a moment, the world feels almost normal. Then the baker steps out of his shop carrying something miraculous, a tray of small steaming rolls, not fancy, not sugary, just simple, warm bread. The smell drifts across the square like a blessing. Had a bit of leftover dough, he explains to the gathering crowd. Figured folks could use a treat. It's not enough for everyone, but he divides the rolls carefully, handing out pieces so each person gets at least a small portion. When he places a warm piece in your hand, your eyes sting unexpectedly. You take a bite, and for a moment the cold fades. Warm bread might actually be the closest thing to magic in this entire cursed year. A quirky tidbit comes to mind. In some regions during hard winters, families sang songs to their bread before baking, believing it helped the dough rise better. You chuckle quietly at the idea and imagine the baker humming lovingly to his dough, like it's a child that needs encouragement. You wander the square, enjoying the rare calm. The scholars' visit left people with new topics to debate. Natural phenomena, distant volcanoes, shifting climates, and while none of those conversations solve the crisis, they do spark a different energy. Curiosity instead of fear, speculation instead of despair. At one point you overhear a debate. It's definitely the volcano, one person insists. Historians still argue whether sunspots cause cooling, another counters. A third shrugs. Whatever it is, I'm just glad today isn't snowing. Honestly, that might be the most relatable opinion you've heard all year. Later, you help Mrs. Hale patch the hole in her roof. She's still tired from sickness, her breathing shallow, but she smiles weakly as you work. Thank you, she whispers. It's nice to feel useful again. You are, you say. We all are. As you walk home, you catch sight of something unexpected. 3 villagers building a snowman using the stubborn patches of unmelted ice. Not a full snowman, mind you. More like a lumpy ice creature with a crooked stick arm and what might generously be called a face. But they're laughing. Actually laughing. One says, if Winter's going to live here rent-free, might as well put him to work. That earns a bark of laughter from you. By the time you reach your house, the sky has softened into pastel shades, peach, lavender, and faint rose. Another strange volcanic sunset, but unlike the ominous ones earlier, this one feels gentle, almost painterly. You stand there for a long moment, taking it in, breathing it in, letting the colours settle your heart. Inside, you eat a simple dinner, thin stew, a handful of greens, and the rest of the bread. You sit by the fire, listening to the quiet crackle. The room glows warmly, shadows dancing on the walls, and then it hits you. Despite everything, the cold, the hunger, the frost, the uncertainty, today didn't feel unbearable. Today had moments, little sparks of joy that slipped through the cracks, and somehow those sparks feel brighter than the darkness around them. Historians still argue whether people survived the year without summer through endurance or hope. But sitting here now, you think, maybe it wasn't one or the other. Maybe it was both. Little joys keeping the big hardships at bay, and as you settle into bed, warmed by your mismatched layers and homemade heat jars, you whisper softly to the quiet room, I'll take tomorrow one small joy at a time. Because sometimes, especially now, small joys are enough. You sense it before you see it. Not a warmth, let's not get ahead of ourselves, but a softening. A tiny shift in the air that makes you pause on your way to the barn the next morning. The wind still bites, but it nips instead of gnaws. The frost still covers the ground, but it sparkles instead of suffocates. Even the sky seems slightly less oppressive, like it finally loosened its heavy grip on the world. You stand there for a moment, squinting at the horizon, unsure whether you're imagining it or witnessing the earliest whisper of change. The animals seem to feel it too. When you open the barn door, your horse doesn't huddle in the corner, misery incarnate. Instead, it lifts its head, snorts a warm puff of air and steps forward. Your cows shift with more energy. The chickens cluck with a smidge more enthusiasm, which for chickens is basically a full Broadway performance. You break the ice in the trough, but the layer is thinner. You touch it cautiously. It cracks like a delicate shell instead of the usual battle-hardened armour. You raise an eyebrow. Well, that's promising. As you feed the animals, you feel something unfamiliar settling inside your chest. Not certainty, not safety, but possibility. Later you walk toward the fields, crunching softly on the frostbitten ground. The crops are long dead, you're not expecting miracles there, but today the air smells faintly different. Less metallic, more earthy. You kneel and press your palm to the soil. It's still cold, but beneath the surface there's a hint of give, the tiniest hint. You let out a slow breath, forming a cloud that drifts gently instead of tearing away in the wind like it did last week. As you rise, you notice a pair of villagers pointing toward the sky. You follow their gaze. There, just above the tree line, a streak of pale yellow sunlight breaks through the volcanic haze. Faint, fragile, but undeniably there. The survivor's sun, a thin ribbon of light fighting its way through a sky that's forgotten how to be bright. "Look," a child shouts, hopping excitedly. "The sky has colour again." A woman beside her presses a hand to her mouth, eyes glistening. "I thought I'd forgotten what that looked like." A mainstream historical fact comes to mind. By late 1816, people across the Northern Hemisphere wrote in diaries about brief tentative clearings in the sky. Moments when the dim sun pierced through the haze. They knew the crisis hadn't ended, but those small breaks meant something vital. The atmosphere was slowly, painfully clearing. You feel that same flicker of hope now. But of course, it's not all improvement. Just as villagers begin murmuring excitedly, someone says, "Don't get your hopes too high. They say the frost is coming back tonight." Someone else mutters, "Historians still argue whether the weather stabilized gradually or lurched like a stubborn mule." You almost laugh, because honestly, that sums up this entire year. But even if frost returns tonight, today feels different. As you walk toward the village square, you feel the energy shifting. People talk in lighter tones. Did you see the sun? Maybe this means something. Maybe the worst is behind us. You know better than to assume that, but you can't help letting a few hopeful thoughts slip into your mind like rebellious sparks. In the square, the blacksmith wipes his brow dramatically and declares, "If we get 1 full hour of sunlight, I'm taking my shirt off and celebrating." "No, you won't," his wife replies immediately, because no one wants to see that. People laugh, genuinely laugh, a sound you haven't heard clearly in months. Mrs. Hale sits outside her home for the first time since illness swept through. She's pale, thin, but stronger today. You sit with her for a moment. "Feels warmer, doesn't it?" she whispers. "A little," you say. "Maybe just enough." She nods. Sometimes enough is all we need. As you walk toward the well, you stop mid-step. Something catches your eye, a single green shoot pushing up beside a stone. Tiny, delicate, almost invisible. Your breath catches. You kneel down carefully, brushing frost from around it. Yes, a sprout. A brave, foolish sprout that didn't get the memo that the world is still broken. "Look at you," you whisper, "trying anyway." You realize something in that moment. Life always tries anyway. You continue about your chores, your steps steadier than usual. You chop wood, fetch water, check on neighbours. The work hasn't changed. The cold hasn't magically vanished. Hunger still shadows the village. But the heaviness in your chest has eased. Evening approaches, and the sky takes on a soft, rusty orange, still tinted by volcanic particles, but gentler than yesterday. You stand outside your home, watching the colours blur like a watercolour painting. The cold returns with the dusk, sharper now, but you feel ready for it. Because you saw the sun today, you saw the sky lighten, you saw a sprout rise from frozen ground. A quirky tidbit flickers into your mind. In some folk traditions, seeing sunlight after a long unnatural darkness was considered a promise sign that misfortune was loosening its grip. You smile faintly. "Promise sign," you whisper. "Maybe, maybe not." Historians still argue whether moments like these meant true change or temporary luck, but you don't care. Because today reminded you that even in the coldest year, the world still remembers how to warm, and that tiny reminder feels like a beginning. The next morning arrives quietly. Not warm, not friendly, but noticeably less cruel than the days before. You open your eyes slowly, half expecting the familiar sting of icy air to assault your face. Instead, the room feels tolerable. Still cold, yes, but not "you might lose a toe before breakfast" cold. You lie there for a long moment, listening. No howling. Wind. No rattling shutters, just a calm, muffled silence. When you finally rise and step outside, the change greets you immediately. The frost is still there, but thin, fragile, like it formed reluctantly overnight. Above you, the sky, still tinged with haze, is brighter. The weak sun presses through a break in the clouds, and for the first time in what feels like centuries, you feel the faint brush of warmth on your cheek. It's almost startling. You stand still, eyes closed, soaking up that timid warmth like a starving plant. The village around you seems to pause as well. People emerge from their homes slowly, blinking at the sky. A few smile, some look suspicious, as if nature is pulling a prank. But most stare upward with a kind of cautious relief, the kind that says, maybe we made it. You walk to the barn, and the animals greet you with more energy than you've seen in weeks. Your horse snorts playfully. One cow actually trots a few steps. Even the chickens, who have spent the last month clucking like they're writing complaint letters to the weather gods, seem almost cheerful. You break the morning ice in the troughs. It cracks easily, a thin shell instead of the thick, unyielding slabs you've been battling. You whisper, "Look at that," as though the water might whisper back. Later, you step out toward the fields, not expecting miracles. And to be fair, you don't get miracles. But you do see something you haven't seen in a long time. Patches of earth that aren't frozen solid. Mud. Actual mud. You crouch down and press your fingers into it, feeling the soft give. It's ridiculous how emotional mud can make a person. A mainstream historical fact surfaces. By late 1816 and into early 1817, temperatures finally began stabilizing. Not returning fully to normal, not yet, but enough that people could breathe again. Enough to plant again the next year. Enough to recover. Slowly, painfully, but recover. You walk into the village square where others have gathered, all wearing that same half-hopeful, half-wary expression. People exchange quiet greetings. Feels different, doesn't it? Think it'll last? Historians still argue whether recovery started suddenly or gradually. I don't care how it started, just that it's happening. The baker steps out of his shop, flour dusting his sleeves like he's been visited by a benevolent ghost. If this keeps up, he announces, I'll try bread with actual yeast again. Several villagers gasp dramatically for comedic effect. You grin. Humour has survived the cold too. Mr. Alden proudly displays a bucket of unfrozen rainwater collected overnight. First time in months, he declares. He looks like he wants applause. Someone gives it to him. You take a slow walk down the main road. The village still bears scars, abandoned houses from families who fled, empty fields where crops failed, fences warped by frost. But among all that hardship, you see something else today. Windows open for the first time in weeks, people chatting outside, a faint smell of cooking drifting on the air, nothing extravagant, just vegetables simmering, but still enough to make your stomach flutter with longing. You help Mrs. Hale fetch water, and she gives you a soft smile, the first real smile you've seen from her since she fell sick. Her cheeks have a bit more colour. Her breathing sounds steadier. She says, I think the worst has passed. You nod slowly, letting her words settle in your chest. As afternoon eases into evening, the sky warms into colours that feel almost normal. Not the eerie volcanic reds you've come to dread, but soft peach, gentle gold, pale blue streaks. The kind of sky you'd see on a calm spring day. The kind that once meant picnics and planting and not worrying whether the sun still remembered its job. A quirky tidbit drifts into your thoughts. Some old traditions claimed that when a long winter finally began to fade, you should whisper a thank you to the sun so it wouldn't change its mind. So, as the last bit of light leaks across the sky, you do it. Quietly. Just in case. You return home, sit by the fire, which now feels like a luxury instead of a necessity, and reflect on the year. All the hardship, the cold, the fear, the hunger, the uncertainty, the way every day felt like its own small endurance test. And yet, here you are. Here your village is. Not whole, not unscarred, but standing. Historians still argue whether communities survived the year without summer because of luck, resilience, cooperation, or shared suffering. Maybe it was all of those. Maybe survival never has a single explanation. You lean back, listening to the soft crackle of the fire, letting your breath settle into an easy rhythm. Outside, the air is still cold, but gentler. As though the world is finally exhaling after months of holding everything tight. You whisper to yourself, "We made it through." And for the first time in a long while, you fully believe it. The night settles around you softly, the cold no longer biting but merely brushing against the walls, as if the world itself is finally growing tired of its long, harsh tantrum. You draw your blanket a little closer, feeling the warmth hold steady against your skin. The fire burns low now, its glow flickering in slow, calming waves that gently illuminate the room. Every creak of the timbers, every faint sigh of wind outside feels softer than before, like the house itself is relaxing with you. Your thoughts drift, unhurried, across the long, difficult months behind you. You remember the snow in June, the frozen fields, the strange red skies, but each memory feels distant now, as though wrapped in a layer of mist. What rises to the surface instead are the small moments, the warm stew, the shared laughter, the stubborn green shoots breaking through the frost, the little things that carried you when the world felt too heavy. Your breathing slows, in, out, a steady rhythm matching the gentle dimming of the firelight. The air feels kinder tonight, the weight on your shoulders lighter. Even the silence feels comforting, like a soft blanket settling over the village as everyone finally, cautiously, begins to hope again. You let your eyes fall half closed, and the last of the day's tension slips away. Outside, the stars glow faintly through the thinning haze, scattered like quiet promises across the sky. And as the warmth of the blanket surrounds you, you feel yourself drifting, sinking, settling into a calm that's been absent for far too long. The worst is behind you now. Let the quiet take over. Let the warmth linger. Let sleep pull you gently into its arms.